It's just normal. Everyone does it.
The student loan problem has reached epidemic proportions.
President Biden's move on student loans providing debt relief to millions of Americans.
$20,000 in student loan debt for a degree that I don't even have.
That's a lot to put on an 18-year-old, and yet we're saying, do you want $50,000 in student loans?
Where are the class action lawsuits against these schools?
The stories all come down to one thing. How has this happened to me when I did everything right?
I did everything right, and the system failed me too.
Financing college is very tough for millions of Americans. Tuition has gone through the roof.
I did look at it as it was investment in myself, like it's okay.
No matter what you do in life, no matter what dreams you chase, if you have a degree to fall back on, you're always safe.
This narrative is complete bullshit.
This is the most important financial decision in your life.
No one is going to stop you from borrowing.
It's not good debt.
I'm paying all these bills and I have nothing.
He's a fucking teacher, and he's drowning in debt. They all went to medical school for 10 years.
The choices that they made now own them.
You know, here I am 36. I have $1 million in student loans.
I know people that are planning to die with that debt.
That is debt that I plan to take with me to the grave. You can't get blood from a stone.
Give me your pound of flesh now.
Ding dong YouTube, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Jobless Coder, and this week Biden announced his student debt relief plan, which is going to give students up to $20,000 each and cost the American taxpayer roughly $300 billion. So you better buckle up, because it's time for another rant. Now, I had actually planned previously to do a video on student debt around this time last October, when the documentary by Dave Ramsey came out called Borrowed Future, and it was dealing with this specific subject of the student debt crisis. So I watched the documentary at the time, and I made a list of notes and a plan for this video, but I never got around to making it because I was just way too busy. But I figured now more than ever would be a perfect time to get back on the subject and make a video on this topic, given the relevancy of the current day and the fact that this student debt relief package from Joe Biden has caused quite a lot of uproar in America. So in preparation for this video, I actually just rewatched like an hour ago the documentary again. So I've now seen it twice, and I've written a list of notes of things that I want to address and talk about and cover. It's all going to be partially a review on the documentary as well. So in no particular order, it's going to be me sharing my thoughts and kind of contrasting my own experiences having gone to university and gotten into student debt with the experiences of those who are featured in the documentary. Now, full disclosure, I'm not American, I'm actually Canadian. However, that does not mean that we don't share similar experiences with the predatory loan system. In fact, there's actually a lot of policies that are shared between Canada, and Canada often reacts in accordance to events that are happening in America. For example, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came out in full defense and support of women's rights and making it extra known, and we wanted to make it extra prevalent that we were going to support the abortion rights in Canada. Likewise, he's been pushing very strongly for gun control measures here in Canada in response to the American violence that's happening with their guns. Even though we don't necessarily have the same level of gun violence here in Canada, if at all, we do get the occasional issue, he's pushing for that. So the Canadian Prime Minister has had a proven track record of reacting to things that are happening in America. So, on the subject of student debt, if enough people in Canada are sharing similar experiences with our American counterparts, we could push for the Canadian Prime Minister to potentially offer up some relief for us as well. Now, student debt is something that affects many people all over the world, especially first world countries, except for maybe a handful of Scandinavian socialist countries where college is completely paid for outright at the expense of the taxpayer. Even here in socialist utopia Canada, where we have free healthcare, we don't get free education, meaning that we get into student debt as well. It might not be to the same level or degree as Americans who are hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, if not some of them millions of dollars in student debt. For us, it might just be a few tens of thousands of dollars of debt. It still is very impactful in our lives, and my life in particular. Full disclosure, I'm going to be completely biased on this subject as it impacts me personally. There are a load of political things that I have opinions on. For example, I mentioned gun rights and Roe v. Wade. None of those are things that I hold with any particular high relevancy of belief. You know, I'm not going to be motivated to go to a protest about losing gun rights or about the losing abortion rights, because that's not a strongly held belief by me. But I would be motivated to go to a protest over the debt crisis, the student debt crisis, because that, for me, on the list of things that I care about, you rank it up there. It's basically right at the top, one of the top things that I actually care about. And to see this being pushed in American policy, it would be nice if the Canadian Prime Minister responded in kind. Now, unlike Joe Biden, Trudeau did not get into office on the promise of resolving this. He never promised anything regarding student debt. Joe Biden specifically said, if you vote for me, I will do this thing to help relieve your debt. And now he is fulfilling one of his campaign promises. Unlike that anvil being held over his head, well, you promised this. It's like, okay, well, politicians lie all the time. Trudeau doesn't have that anvil over his head because he never made the promise in the first place. He never said, if you elect me, I'm going to resolve all your student debt. Now, in the name of full transparency, I will tell you that I have roughly $20,000 in student loan debt for a degree that I don't even have. About $9,000 of that is held by the Alberta government. It's the Alberta government that backed that up. The other $11,000 come from federal student loans, and I will never pay those off. That is debt that I plan to take with me to the grave. There is no amount of money that you can pay me. If I won the lottery and I won the $55 million lottery, I would not pay that debt off. And if you want to know why, stick around to watch the rest of this video, because I will tell you exactly why I refuse to pay that debt. And there are other people out there like myself who are defaulting on their loans, and to that I say, I'm sorry, you can't get blood from a stone. On the subject of the documentary itself, that was produced, edited, released by the Dave Ramsey Foundation. Now, I like a lot of what Dave Ramsey does. There's a lot of what he does that I do not like, however. And the more and more I learn about him, the less and less I find myself liking him. I find him to be less of a financial mentor or a financial advisor, and more of one of those, financial gurus that's just a complete scam artist. And if you want to know more about what I'm referring to specifically, I would recommend watching any one of the videos on Joshua Fluke's channel about Dave Ramsey, because he helps to expose a lot of the corruption of this man and his organization and his company, internal documents that get leaked from employees, and the way that he handles himself. He seems to have this sort of Calvarier, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, bucko kind of attitude about him. To that I don't particularly like, because it doesn't acknowledge the actual pain and suffering and victimization of people that have been taken advantage of by this predatory loan system. I've watched many of his episodes on his channel about student loans, and even people phoning in and they say, I've got $1 million of debt, and he seems to be very condescending to them, insulting of them. How could you be so stupid? Where did you not realize? What was the mistake you made? Which which is ironic given that he loves to preach a lot about faith, being a Christian and all, and the fact that he loves to talk about, oh, this and that and the Bible and God, but he conveniently ignores the part of the Bible where Jesus said that it would be easier to thread a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, or something to that effect. I might be getting the Bible verse wrong, but you know, he's a Christian, and it seems like be more like, you know, he likes to parade it around. Look at me, look how virtuous I am. I'm a Christian, but oh, don't you dare forgive student loans. You know, people phone in and they say, I don't know, should I pay my student loans? Biden might forgive him. He says, no, Biden will never forgive student loans. And now look, it's like egg on his face now that Biden's forgiving student loans. And the fact that he himself filed bankruptcy in the past. So obviously the so-called, oh, well, you signed on the dotted line, you should have known what you were doing. That doesn't apply to Dave Ramsey. If he takes out a loan for a business that fails and he has to file bankruptcy, he can just resolve that debt like that. But, oh, the students are suffering. Oh, well, sucks to be them. They should have known better. Now, that doesn't mean, however, that the documentary is bad. I actually really enjoy the documentary, and I recommend anyone to watch it. You can have bad ideas and be a bad faith actor like Dave Ramsey, but you can also produce good quality shit. And the documentary is well filmed. And one of the things that I look for in these types of documentaries, whether it be on climate change or, you know, government corruption, is there a solution in there? Or are they just picking at a problem and trying to expose it? Are they trying to present some kind of solution to the problem instead of just complaining about it? And there are a few solutions to which I've noted down that I'll get into in this video. Now, another thing I wanted to point out about the documentary is that it is hosted on his website. And while I don't usually pay for movie or documentary rentals, I'll do my best to try and find it on a streaming service that's free, because I'm not particularly, you know, financially well off to spend $20 on a movie every time I want to see something. The Dave Ramsey Foundation has done an excellent job of cleansing the internet of any copies of this. So the only way that you can watch this documentary is by paying for it. So I decided in October to bite the bullet and pay for it. Turns out I could not even pay for it because his website doesn't allow credit cards that are non-US based. I got specifically rejected because I live in Canada and have a Canadian credit card. So I had to buy the documentary on YouTube at the time, and I just rebought it now, an hour or two ago, so that I could rewatch it again. So I've now paid for this documentary twice. You're welcome, Dave Ramsey. And because I'm not going to make any money on this, because this channel's not monetized, I hope that the viewing pleasure is worth your experience. Now, the documentary opens with a quote at the title screen where somebody says, "How has this happened to me when I did everything right?" And this seems to be a reoccurring thread amongst anybody who is suffering from student loans, myself. Because as for me, I always did well in school. I was like the A+ student, you know, honor grad type of stuff. I went to university, I did good there, and it says, well, how did this happen to me? I did everything that I was told I was supposed to do. Now, clearly, if you're just out smoking drugs shooting up heroin on the street, and then you say, how did this happen to me? It's like, well, you know, society kind of told you not to do that shit, and you did it anyways, and now look where you are. But I did the things that were deemed appropriate, the things that you were supposed to do, quote unquote, supposed to do, and where did I end up here? I live in my parents' upstairs bedroom, and I've been homeless twice. And I've had to learn very difficultly the hard way that the promise of going to college for a better life is not a guarantee. And I have several problems with that, because if you look at the way that colleges and universities, both in America and in Canada, advertise themselves, it's always about a better life, a better future, a better job, but there's no guarantee to it. At least with the lottery, they're up front. They say, oh, you can buy this $2 lottery ticket and you have a 0.00001% chance you'll win $1 million. And people know, oh, the odds are basically nothing. But universities never advertise up front the odds or the statistics as to whether or not you'll actually get a job in the field that you study. They just say, come to our school and get a degree so that way you'll have a better life. So my question is, as much responsibility as should be placed on the student for signing their name on the dotted line, and I'm not absolving all students of that responsibility, we take some responsibility in part. Where's the responsibility on the schools for false advertising? If you falsely advertise a product and you say it does something that it doesn't, you can get sued. Where are the class action lawsuits against these schools for falsely advertising a better life? And then you find out that that better life at the end of the road, upon graduation, is not actually there. The documentary puts a lot of focus on this lie that is perpetuated amongst teachers and mentors and coaches and parents, that if you don't go to school, then get good grades, then you're going to drop out, you're going to be a high school dropout, a college dropout, and you're going to fail. You're going to get stuck at McDonald's working the rest of your life for minimum wage. But there's a couple problems with that. Number one, they don't address the fact that there are some people who are working for McDonald's making minimum wage who are much happier than those who are making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, but are $300,000 in debt. So first of all, where is it upon the counselors and the parents to say, if you don't go to university, you might not get these jobs, this job and this job and this job. You might be stuck working at McDonald's, and that's totally fine. Where are they to come out and say that it's not the end of the world if you get stuck working a minimum wage job? They don't. They just basically say that you're going to be a failure, you're going to get stuck working at McDonald's, life is going to suck, so you should go to school and go $300,000 in debt to do so. This is actually a topic that is brought up quite often on Tim Pool's podcast, which I really enjoy and I tend to agree with, when they talk about the reasons why this idea it gets perpetuated that you need a degree to succeed. Because back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, when it was more of like an optional thing, if you look at the demographic of people who were going to school, it was because they were motivated and dedicated and wanted to learn a skill. And then because of that, they took that skill that they learned and they applied it to their job and made lots of money. So you might have had some, Uncle Joe, whatever in the family. He's the only one in the family with a degree and he makes more money than anybody else in the family. And so everyone says, why is Uncle Joe make so much money? And they think it's because he has a degree. But in reality, it's not because of the degree that Uncle Joe has money. It's because he's motivated and dedicated. And that was the reason that drove him to take university classes in the first place, and then he took those classes and applied them to his job, and that was the reason he was successful. So it has nothing to do with having a piece of paper that says you're qualified. It has everything to do with your motivation and discipline in life. Now, if you look at someone like Tim Pool, for example, he is a high school dropout. He didn't even finish. And then at some point in his life, he bought a plane ticket and went to California and started skating. And then he worked for Vice and Fusion. And he went overseas to do overseas reporting in combat zones. And he put himself into these dangerous situations where he could have potentially lost his life. And he was motivated to do that. And now you look at him. He runs one of the most successful YouTube channels, one of the most successful political podcasts. He's got a multi-million-dollar media organization where he employs 20 or 30 so people. He's writing songs and making music and creating culture. And he lives in a massive mansion in the middle of the woods with chickens. And none of this came to him because he went to school. All of this came to him because of the choices that he made in his life. And now, granted, there's a good amount of luck that comes in that. You look at someone else who's even more successful than Tim Pool, for example, like Mr. Beast. Now, I'm not mistaken, but I do believe that he graduated from high school. And he might have even done 1 year of college or something like that, or a couple months before he dropped out and started focusing on his YouTube videos. Now, for Mr. Beast, number one, he has an idea of how to market himself to people in a way that is fun and entertaining and that they enjoy. And then he gets 100 million followers on YouTube. He is the largest channel on the platform, and it has nothing to do with having a degree. He makes millions of dollars every year, which he invests most of it back into his videos that make him that money, but he still makes money, and he's very successful as a result of it. And it's because he's dedicated and motivated passionate about what he does, and it has nothing to do with having a piece of paper. So my next question then is, where's the responsibility on the parents, on the teachers, on the coaches, on the mentors? Instead of pushing this narrative that you're going to get stuck working at McDonald's if you don't go to school, why don't you push the narrative that, oh, you could be the next Tim Pool if you don't go to school. You could be the next Mr. Beast if you don't go to school. But it's up to you to put in the hard work and dedication, and you have to have a little bit of luck, and you have to understand how to market yourself too to become that successful. But why do they push this narrative that it's a McDonald's or bust? Luckily in my household, the way that I was raised with my parents, they never really pushed that narrative. It was always, okay, university is an option. They recognized, though, that because I was an A+ academic student, that was most likely going to be on the table was university, but they never said to me, oh, you're just going to be a failure if you work at McDonald's. And I'm sure if I just ended up working at McDonald's and I was living on my own and paying bills and making money and saving, then my parents would be totally fine with that. They would be completely proud of whatever I did. But for me, that wasn't what I wanted to do. It's not what I'm interested in. I like to code. I like programming. I like computers. That's why I went to university for 3 years for a computer science degree. I'll get into that a little bit more and the reasons I dropped out. But either way, now I'm $20,000 in debt for a degree I don't even have. One of the other things I want to address is the statistics behind, oh, well, you're more likely to be successful if you have a degree. Sure, you can be successful without a degree like Tim Pool or Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or name any one of these people on the list, but you're more statistically likely to be successful with a degree. My response to that is, okay, tell that to the 30% of doctors and nurses who got fired in Canada for refusing the vaccine. They all went to medical school for 10 years to get degrees and master's degrees and doctorate degrees so that they could be highly qualified technical specialists in their field of study. And then all of that got thrown down the drain because they made one personal decision not to get vaccinated. They weren't fired for not having a degree. They were fired for making a personal choice. So don't come to me and give me that bullshit that you're going to be more successful and less likely to be unemployed because you have a degree. Tell that to the half of people from Netflix who just got let go, who have a degree in computer science because they thought if they worked for a big name company like Netflix that they'd have job security. Tell that to the thousands of people who are working minimum wage jobs baking your groceries, and they have degrees in literature and degrees in science and degrees in engineering and math. It's not just all underwater basket weaving, my ass. They interviewed a teacher who is donating blood plasma as a means of making the extra money needed to survive. He didn't go to school for fucking gender studies or underwater basket weaving. So all you lemmings on Twitter that love to tweet and make fun, oh my god, it's just you and your underwater basket weaving. Oh, maybe you shouldn't have gone to school for gender studies. He's a fucking teacher and he's drowning in debt. Early in the documentary, they brought in Mike Rowe, and if you don't know who Mike Rowe is, he's very popular. He ran a show called Dirty Jobs on the Discovery Channel years ago. I'm not sure if it's still active. It might actually be still active. I think he's even done a little bit of political activism. He was recently interviewed on the Tim Pool show, and they talked about motivation in college and all this degree stuff that is covered in the documentary, and Mike Rowe is great. I like Mike Rowe. The TV show that he was in, Dirty Jobs, basically puts him in a bunch of different situations where he gets to experience what it's like to be, you know, the sewer gutter cleaner or whatever, who's having to scrape literal shit off the walls of the sewer. They're rolling around in the mud with pigs. And that's totally fine if that's your thing. But you also need to recognize and understand that a large number of people are not really into that. You know, there's no amount of money that you can pay me where I'm going to go down into the I don't care. You want to pay me $2 million a year, I will turn it down. I'm not going into the sewer system to scrape shit off the walls. And I'm sorry, I do have OCD, and that may contribute to it. Other guys, they might be perfectly fine rolling around in literal feces if they get paid enough to do so. But to put that on the table and say that, oh, well, you can do this job, you can be the Undertaker and deal with literal dead bodies, you know? You don't need a degree for, you might need a degree to be an Undertaker, I don't know. you can do that without education, but you need to recognize that there are certain jobs. You want to be a nuclear physicist. If that's your dream job, go for it, man. But you can't be a nuclear physicist without some kind of education behind that. You want to be an engineer and build bridges. Perfectly fine. You have to get an engineering degree to do so. My industry is a little bit different with computer science because you can just do shit. You can just build an app, build a website, make a game. You don't need a degree to do that, and I wish I had realized that sooner. One of the things that they pointed out in the documentary is that there's something specifically different about putting the word student before loan to say student loan that makes it different than any other loan. One of which being the fact that you cannot absolve student loan on a bankruptcy. Unlike taking out a regular loan to start a business or buy a car or buy a mortgage for a house, if you default on that, your house gets taken away by the government. If you default on your car loan, the car agency comes and they repossess your car. If you default on your business and you go bankrupt, then you file a Chapter 11, I believe, bankruptcy in America. If you default on your student loans, well, fuck you, you shouldn't have taken them out in the first place, is the response you get from everyone and anyone and the government, and they'll send the full weight of the Federal Bureau of Investigation after you if they have to get you to pay. Where's your pound of flesh? Now, don't get me wrong, I am fully aware that part of the reason that student loans can't be absolved in a bankruptcy is actually Joe Biden's fault from his previous time when he was in Congress and the Senate before he became the president. I'm pretty sure he voted on several bills that made it so. I don't know what the laws are in Canada pertaining to that, whether or not Canadian student loans can be absolved on a bankruptcy. I've never really looked into it. But at the same time, the fact that that's the way it works in America is not very good. Now, if this is Joe Biden wanting to correct the record, make things straight, try to fix the shit that he broke years ago, I'll give him that. I'll give him that pass. I don't think he's a good president. I don't like Joe Biden. I think he's destroying the country, and I don't even live there. But I will give Joe Biden the pass if he wants to resolve the student debt crisis that he partially helped to create. Now, me personally, I think he's not even cognizant of anything. He just reads from the teleprompter what they tell him to do. But if the Joe Biden administration wants to resolve the wrongdoings of the past, then I'm perfectly fine with that. I think there should be student debt relief. I am a full supporter of that decision, and it is one of the few Democrat policies that I will stand behind. One of the other things that happens when you put the word student behind loan that doesn't just change things from a policy perspective, but it makes you think about them differently, and this is something Tim Pool has also brought up on his show, bringing him back into the picture. He's talked with financial analysts and experts that have said, if you came to me and asked for a $40,000 loan to start a business, and that business would take 4 years to create, and there wouldn't be any revenue coming in for that entire time, they'd laugh you out of the room, basically. You would not get that loan, because that's a stupid financial decision. Why would you invest $40,000 in something that's not even going to make you a dime for 4 years? But that's essentially what a student loan is. They say, oh, you invest money in us now so that you can get a better job that pays more money in the future. And in the case of computer science specifically, it's supposed to be a high-paying job, at least I'm told. At least I know of other people that make good money in this industry. You know, some of them have degrees, some of them don't have degrees. But when you see that Google and Facebook and Apple pay their interns $70,000 a year, going 20 grand in student debt doesn't feel all that bad, especially given that it's 20 grand Canadian, which is like 15 in American comparison. I have never made more than 20 grand in a year in my entire life, which is like 15 grand in America. And I'll tell you, if you're making 15,000 US dollars a year, it's money in and money out. You get your paycheck and boom, it's gone. Everything, boom, it's gone. Everything, boom, you don't get to save a dime. You're living, you're renting, you're probably sharing with roommates because you can't afford to even rent a place on your own, let alone fund a mortgage. And God forbid you want children in the future, because you get $15,000 a year, money in and money out. All of that money goes to rent and food. There isn't a dime left over for debt. So if the students are told that if they go and take a computer science degree, they're going to get a $70,000 a year job working for Amazon, and they take that degree on that promise. Well, where is it upon the university to back that promise up? Get them in the door with an interview with Amazon. You know, get them in front of the CEOs and get them in front of the executives of these big name companies. But not every school does that, and a little bit more on that later. That is one of the particular reasons why I flat out refuse to pay for my degree that I don't even have. I am never paying that debt back because I got nothing out of it. You know, if you take out $20,000 to go buy a car and there's no car, you're going to get pissed off. Why am I paying $20,000 for fucking nothing? I see all these people on Twitter, the government should pay for my mortgage, the government should pay for my car insurance and my car. It's like, well, my question is, do you have a car? Yes or no? Do you have a mortgage? Yes or no? Do you have a job that allows you to afford these things? Yes or no? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're employed, fuck you, you're complaining too much, because there's a good 8% of us in the country that are not in that position of employment. And I get into arguments quite often with people too, because they like to point out the fact, oh, well, you did go to school for 3 years and therefore you learned something. And maybe to some extent that's true, but it didn't help me get a job. It's never helped me in anything. Nothing that I've ever learned in school has ever been applicable to anything that I've done in real life. Now, for me personally, I was motivated to go to school. I fall in this ballpark of people like Tim Pool and Mr. Beast and Uncle Joe, you know, who was motivated to go to school because they wanted to learn something. When I went to university, I wanted to learn because I was already programming when I was 12 years old. I came home from school and that was what I did for fun. I could have just sat on my ass and played video games all day or watched TV. I was programming, I was making websites, I was watching YouTube tutorials, I was following stuff, but I always found myself hitting a roadblock. There would be something I couldn't figure out, some concept that didn't make sense to me, and I got it into my stupid brain that, oh, if I just went to university and took these classes, then through the process of the professor teaching it, I'll figure things out. And then it wasn't until I actually got into school and started asking questions. Well, how do you do this? And how do you do that? And these were not questions, mind you, that were outside of the realm of the courses that I was taking. It was not like I was asking the professor to tell me something that had nothing relevant to do with the class. It was like, oh, well, it's a networking course. You know, I don't know how to set up this IP protocol. He says, oh, just Google it. And that was mostly the response I got from all the professors. Anytime I asked a question on how do I do something, the answer was Google it. Google it, Google it, Google it, Google it. Why am I paying $20,000 to get an education from a professor whose only answer is to go Google it when Google's fucking free? Part of the documentary goes through the history of the loan system in America and how it got structured with, you know, Sallie Mae and how they became this big conglomerate organization and how it's not even a company anymore, but like a coalition of companies that all fall under one umbrella, and it's basically just an industry at this point. And they point out, you know, how predatory it is. They interviewed some lady who was a former employee from Navient, from their call center, and Navient being one of the companies in America that deals with private student loans. Now, for me, I've never had to deal with any of these companies, Sallie Mae or Navient, because I'm in Canada, and my loans are held by Alberta, which, being the province, is the equivalent of American states, and so it's like a statewide loan, as well as the federal loan from the Canadian government. Those are the two entities that hold my debt. Now, I don't know if they've since sold that debt off to a third-party debt collector organization, but I will tell you the predatory nature of debt collectors, because I get phone calls from them all of the time. They're basically the only people that call me anymore. And one thing in particular that I find extremely fascinating is that I'll get some message on my answering machine that's like, this is an important message for Evan Svensson, he needs to call this number. And it's like, oh, it's so important you sent your bot robots to phone me. Yeah, if it was so important that you needed to collect this debt from me, then why are you sending fucking robots to do your job? But either way, I've actually talked to real people that are debt collectors, and they're very predatory. They'll recommend getting into further debt to pay off this debt. They say, oh, well, maybe you can borrow some money from a friend or from a parent. It's like, oh, so I made a bad financial decision and now I owe money to you, and your solution is to make more bad financial decisions by borrowing money from friends and family so I can pay you off? Yeah, it's not going to happen. Which is another reason, partly, why I refuse to pay this debt off. Because I don't believe that you should have to pay for something that you didn't even get, first of all. But number two is because these people don't give a shit about anything. They will give out loans in the millions of dollars range if they think they can get it back from you because they can hold it over you for the rest of your life. It's like slavery with extra steps. And one more thing I want to point out is that my parents are very, very different when it comes to finances. They're actually very smart and very fiscally conservative. And they did something brilliant, absolutely fucking brilliant. I don't know any other person whose parents ever did this. But in Canada, when you have children, you receive money from the government, a certain amount each month, and it's supposed to help subsidize for buying diapers and buying extra food that you weren't buying before. And I think there might be similar welfare programs like that in America. And in Canada, it just comes to you automatically. The number of children you have, you get that money. Most people, they spend it on the extra diapers or the food that they need to help subsidize their wage cost. My parents covered all of that cost up front so that they could take that money and put it into a savings account for myself, my brother, and my sister. And when we graduated from high school, each respectively, I had about $20,000 in that account to go towards my education, the time I was going to spend at university, in addition to $18,000 of the registered education savings plan. So there was $38,000 sitting in the account for me, and I still went $20,000 in debt over and above that doing 3 years of schooling. And had I done an additional 4th year of schooling and actually got my degree, it would have been more like $25,000 to $30,000 in debt. Had my parents not been that wise when they were younger to take that money and save it instead of spending it on groceries and diapers like most people did, I would have been $50,000 or $60,000 in debt for a degree. So when I say I have $20,000 and people say, oh, that's not much of a big deal, it's like, well, it could have been worse, number one. And number two, when you have only made $20,000 in a year, $20,000 of debt is a lot. And this is why I support student debt relief. Now, granted, are there going to be bad actors that take advantage of that? Absolutely. People like AOC. I don't like AOC. I think she came out recently and was complaining about having $20,000 of student debt herself. 20,000 American dollars. Coming from someone who makes $170,000 a year, I don't think that's acceptable. She has $20,000 of student debt, and she has a salary of $170,000. Where the fuck is her money going? I don't know. I don't know what her budget is. I know she lives in New York, and rent there is really expensive. It's like $5,000 a month for an apartment. It doesn't matter. If you're making that kind of money and you're complaining about student debt, I'm sorry. That's your problem. That's not a me problem. That's a you problem. However, if you're making $30,000 a year, $20,000 a year, $10,000, $15,000 a year, and you have $60,000 of debt held over your head, that's a little different. That's just why it needs to be a case-by-case situation. And you can't just lump everyone together into this, oh, well, everyone who got a degree makes the most amount of money. They're the highest, they're the wealthiest people in the nation. I saw the best thing on Twitter this week. It made me laugh so much. It was the best response to these people. Somebody said, and I believe, if I'm quoting this correctly, my brother in Christ, wealthy people don't have student debt, they have wealth. And that has never been a more true statement than that. Wealthy people who come from wealthy families who go to wealthy institutions like Harvard have their entire education paid for up front in cash. They don't go into student debt. The people that go into student debt are the ones who come from middle or lower class income families who somehow make it into Harvard because they are grade A students, they have good grades, they can make it into Harvard, but they can't afford $200,000 a year tuition to go to Harvard. So now they take out $800,000 over a 2-year program so that they can get a degree that is promising them $150,000 a year, and you'll pay it off in 10 years or something like that. I've listened to Tim Pool and his analysis on the student debt, and he talks about how you have to pay the upfront cost, none of the interest, because that's all predatory. There are people that have paid $30,000 in interest and they still owe $19,000 on a $10,000 student loan, or some ridiculous number like that. Like they've paid 3 or 4 or 5 times more than what the initial loan was because the interest just keeps dragging them down. So first of all, yes, you need to stop the program of guaranteed student loans by the government. You need to incentivize people to find alternative means to fund the universities, which they explore in the documentary. They interview some college student who talked about his lawnmower business. He buys and sells and flips lawnmowers for a profit, and he used that money to help graduate from university after a 4-year program debt-free. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily for everyone, and he even says it himself. You know, lawnmowers are not necessarily for everyone, but if you like shoes or whatever, then that's your thing. You buy and sell and flip shoes for a profit. Now, I have also tried that before, buying and selling and flipping video games for profit, because that's my niche, and it is very difficult. It is very time consuming. Half of the time people, they message you on Facebook, buy and sell, and they're like, oh, I really want to buy this, and then dead silence, they never message back. Like, it's time consuming, it's not a guarantee, you don't make a lot of money. So, you know, maybe you'd be better off buying and selling and flipping lawnmowers for thousands of dollars a piece. And on a single trade, you can make $1,000, as opposed to, oh, I made $5 on this trade and $10 on that trade and $30 on this trade, but I invested 5 hours of work in taking pictures and uploading them and putting them on Kijiji and Facebook and all these buy and sell places, and all that time wasted to make $20. You know, they interviewed one woman who wrote a book, and I believe the title of the book was Confessions of a Scholarship Winner or something like that. She's very famous. She won over $1 million, or no, I think it was $500,000 in scholarships, and they talk about that as well in the documentary. You can get these scholarship programs, right, to pay for your education. Well, I will tell you, my personal experience with scholarships is not very great. When I was in high school, I went and I looked at all these different scholarships online, and I did a ton of research to find different scholarships. And one of the things she brings up is, oh, well, if you make $500 or you make $1,000 from a scholarship and you put 2 hours of work into it, what other job can you make $500 an hour for? It's like, well, first of all, there's a major problem with that thinking, that line of thinking, because if you put 2 hours of work into a minimum wage job for $15 an hour, you're guaranteed a $30 paycheck at the end of that. If you put 2 hours of work into writing essays for a scholarship, it's gambling. It basically is gambling at that point, because now you've wasted 2 hours of your life that you could have been doing something to get a guaranteed return on, oh, well, there's a percentage chance you might get this scholarship. So, you know, it's like telling somebody that, oh, well, if you buy this $10 lottery ticket, because there's a 0% chance if you don't, and there's a 0.00001% chance of winning if you do. So I did this whole scholarship thing. I looked at all the scholarships that applied to me, you know, specifically ones that dealt with community service and volunteer work. I spent 6 years of my life in the Air Cadet program, and I did volunteer work almost every single weekend. And I kept being told over and over and over by the officers, by the cadets, by the parents, that this is great. This is a good thing on your resume. This is going to get you scholarships. This is going to get you jobs. This is going to make people notice you. Not one single scholarship that I applied to did I win. And I applied to 60 of them. And this is 60 of them with like 2 or 3 hours each invested, writing an essay, compiling my resume, printing it off. I had it all nicely done up. I put them in envelopes. I mailed them to whatever facility needed to receive the scholarship. Not a single thing. I did not make a dime from doing that. Not one scholarship I applied to. And these were things that were pertinent to me, right? Like I said, community service work, volunteer work. I talked about my time in Air Cadets. Nothing. Not a thing. Now, I know that sometimes people will talk about scholarships that are like, oh, this is only for women. And then the only person who wins it is some guy because he's literally the one and only person that applied to it. I didn't go for that because I just didn't feel comfortable applying to scholarships that didn't, I'm not going to apply for a scholarship for a black person in the hopes that I might be the only person who applies even if I'm white. So I just didn't do that. I put my time and effort into scholarships that were applicable to me, and I made nothing. Now, granted, I did get some scholarships. One scholarship I got upon graduation was because my father was the chairman of the local car show, the classic vintage car show, and I would go and volunteer with him, and I made them a website and stuff, and so the coalition of guys that run the car association got together, and they're like, oh, well, we should make up a scholarship and give to him and stuff. So I got that. It wasn't anything that I applied to. I didn't go out of my way to write an essay to earn it. I just got given it because I had put in some hours of volunteer work with an organization that my dad was the chairman of. The other scholarship I got was through the Alberta student government. They have a specific program. I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. It's like Laura Ipsum or something like that, where if you get a grade average and above, I think it's 60% in all of your courses and above, then you can win money. And then it goes up. If it's like 70 or 80 or 90%, it goes up in tiers. So I got, I think, $1,500 from that scholarship because my grades were guaranteed that I was going to get that scholarship based on my grades. And then this other one that was thrown together like last minute because the car association guys wanted to give me some money. So maybe at most I got $2,000 or $3,000 towards my education. And then I see in the documentary they got this guy who's selling lawnmowers. He made $80,000 in scholarships, and this other woman makes $500,000 in scholarships. And I'm like, how? I don't know. Maybe things are different in Canada. Maybe if I was in America and applied for American scholarships, I would have actually got something. But of the 60 that I applied for, not a dime. Now, on the note of getting education partially for free, getting money, scholarships on that, I did get one other scholarship which I turned down, and there's a kind of story behind that. It's probably the worst decision I've ever made in my life. I will acknowledge that that was a bad decision, but there was a reason behind that decision that I'll tell you. When I was in school, I did the science fair. Right from grade 1, I did the science fair. Every single year, I did the science fair. When I got to about middle school was when most people stopped doing the science fair. It was like part of the school curriculum in elementary school, and then afterwards it was optional, in which case I was the only one, not only in my class, but the entire school. Mind you, the school was small, 250 people. I was the only one in the entire school doing the science fair, and then my brother and sister. So our family was the only one in the entire school doing the science fair. When I was in grade 12, I did a project called Biomass Battery that was dealing with looking at taking leftover food that was degrading and trying to extract energy and electricity from it somehow. And I figured that if you put, the copper wires or whatever into a lemon, it generates a current from the acidity. I figured as the food's breaking down, the more acidic it becomes, the more electricity it'll generate through that process. So I did a bunch of tests and experiments, and I got the Best of Science Fair award. It was awarded to me by my grade 1 teacher, who was a big part of the science fair. And to see me go from being in his grade 1 class to getting this Best of Science Fair award in grade 12, it was a big deal. Nobody in my school had ever won that award because the other communities in the area that did the district science fair, they all participated. For them, in like grade 6, 7, and 8, and even beyond, it was part of their curriculum, even after elementary school. So everyone did the science fair, and then the trophy went to them because statistically they had more people doing the science fair. For me, being the only one in the entire school to do the science fair and then take that trophy home was a big deal. I then went to the county fair afterwards, which deals with a larger area of schools, and the projects that get the Best of Fair get to go to that. And so I did that, and I won a full year paid tuition scholarship for Red Deer College. Now, the reason that I turned it down was twofold. At the time that I had won this scholarship, it was like the middle of February, I was already dead set in my mind that I was going to the University of Lethbridge. I had already gone and done the tours of the campuses and the facility, and I decided I was going to the University of Lethbridge. I had even, I think, applied and got accepted maybe at the time, and my dad might have even paid the $500 upfront cost for the acceptance. So that was already dealt with. I did not want to go to Red Deer College, even though I could have done a year of my study at Red Deer College and then transferred that to the University of Lethbridge and then done the remaining 3 there. I turned down the money. I even asked if I could give the money away to one of my friends in my classes who I knew were going to Red Deer College. The other reason I turned it down was because I was brainwashed, or I had been led to believe that college was beneath me. I was the A+ student, I was the honor grad, I was getting all these high marks, and the highest level education you can get is at university. College is great if you want to do a trade, you want to be a mechanic, a welder, a plumber. Great, fine, you go to college and you do that. But I wanted to do computer science. It didn't matter that the college offered computer science courses. I wanted the best education possible, and for that I had to go to university. So I turned down a year's tuition paid scholarship, and that is entirely on me. You can say, oh my god, you turned it. Fine, I made a mistake. I made a really big fucking mistake, and it's destroyed the rest of my life ever since. Should your life be destroyed over a single mistake? Maybe. You know, if you commit murder, you go to jail. That's a big mistake. Your life gets destroyed. If you make a bad financial decision, equally so, your life gets destroyed. And to be completely honest, it wasn't until many years later that I realized I probably would have had a better time in college anyways, because I did not realize, and nobody told me along the way, none of the guidance counselors, none of the teachers, nobody told me shit about what I was going to anticipate when I got to university. I thought that computer science was programming. What I didn't realize was that university computer science is like high-level concept mathematics, the fundamental theories behind how computers worked. And number one, I wasn't very good at the math. And number two, I didn't really enjoy it. If I really, really, really wanted to do all this math, I would have gone to school for a mathematics degree. But I didn't. I went to school because I wanted to learn programming and game design and how to make a website and all these things that I already had some inclination of. And my first year of university was a breeze. It was like super easy because I had already been programming since I was 12. So, you know, the concepts of for loops and while loops and if statements, that all made sense to me. And I was able to breeze through that with flying colors and help everyone else in my class as a result. They all came to me to help with their homework because I was the only one that actually understood it. Like right day one, I knew how to do it. And then when I got into my second and third year, things got more complicated. They got less on the programming side and more on the math and theory side, which I wasn't good at. I thought I was good at math. I was really good at math in high school. University math, not so much. They're completely different things. It's like night and day. It's like earth and space. It's completely far out of here. And so I started struggling, and I was actually failing classes for the first time in my life. Mathematics courses that I didn't even want to take because I wanted to learn about coding. And then I found out that, had I actually gone to college, I would have been taught, you know, practical programming skills, how to make a website, how to build a game. The things I wanted to learn, I would have learned in college. But I was brainwashed by this idea that college was lesser. And make no mistake, my dad's a mechanic. He went to college for 2 years. He was the best person in the class. He got the top grades out of everyone in his class. And I don't fault my dad for being a mechanic. I don't think that being a mechanic is beneath the person. But for me, that's not what I want. I don't want to be in construction. I don't want to be doing these dirty jobs like Mike Rowe. I don't want to be a mechanic. I don't want to be, you know, hands-on whatever trade school. I wanted to do computer science work. But I didn't want to do the theory behind it. I wanted to do the practical programming skills. What a bachelor in computer science degree sets you up for is more like, you know, algorithm design, the stuff that Google might want to hire you for. But then again, they're only going to hire the best of the best. So unless you excel at the algorithm design, Google doesn't want you. They don't need code monkeys because they've got algorithms that'll code themselves, basically. During the documentary, they interview a girl who was like dead set, I have to go to this school. She was exactly like me. I know exactly where I want to go. I know exactly what I want to do. And they asked her why, like why this school in particular, when there could be other schools that are cheaper, you know, community colleges, for example. And she's like, oh, well, I fell in love with the campus and it was beautiful and I really liked it and I feel I'll be happy there. And if you would have asked me when I was 18 years old. Why did I choose the University of Lethbridge? It was for that exact reason. I had toured a couple different campuses. I had toured the campus at Red Deer College. I had toured the campus at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And I had toured the campus in Lethbridge. And the one campus that I liked above all else was the University of Lethbridge for fundamentally a variety of different reasons. First of all, it was a smaller school, about 8, 9, 10,000 people, whereas the University of Alberta is 50,000 people. So I felt, number one, I would get a more hands-on, approach where the teacher would actually know your name instead of just being a number. And given that I come from a small town where my high school was like 250 people and all of the teachers knew all of our names, I wanted that similar experience at a smaller school. It was also physically smaller, meaning I could walk from one end of the campus to the next in about 10 minutes. I didn't have to literally get in my car and drive halfway across to the city to get to the next building, where I had heard horror stories, from people who were going to the University of Edmonton who were like, yeah, I've got one class here, and then I've got another class that's like 15 kilometers away, and they're 5 minutes apart, so I have to leave this class early, and then drive through the city to get to this next. I didn't want to do any of that. So that was one of the reasons I settled with the University of Lethbridge. And the University of Lethbridge is not a big, high-name university in Canada. One of the things the documentary covers is this competitive aspect that universities have, where they're constantly competing for whoever's the one on top, and there's like magazines and articles and news that will rank them. This is the best university, and this is the next best university, and this is the third best university down the list. If you look up the best Canadian universities, I don't even know if U of L makes the list. You're going to get things like McGill University and the University of Waterloo or York University. All these universities, most of them are going to be UBC. They're either going to be in BC or Ontario somewhere. Maybe the University of Alberta might make the list. And there are good people at the University of Lethbridge, make no mistake. I know a professor there, professor of physics, who helped build components that are now on the James Webb Telescope. And I took a cosmology course from him, and it was probably one of my favorite courses that I took at the university. But the documentary fails fundamentally when it goes down this path of, maybe you can go to a community college, or not go to Harvard, not go to Stanford, not go to these high-level, expensive Ivy League schools. You can get the same education for like a fraction of the cost at a community college. And in America, they don't really have like colleges the same here in Canada. Our colleges are the same as your guys' community college. Our universities are the same as your guys' like high-level colleges and or universities like University of Harvard, Stanford, MIT, for examples. The documentary kind of gives this false pretense that if you go to these other alternative schools, you can actually avoid getting in debt altogether, which is completely false. Because like I said, if you look up the top universities in Canada, U of L probably is not even on the list. And I went to the U of L, I still got $20,000 in debt. So this narrative that if you go to a cheaper school, you can avoid student loan debt is complete bullshit. Now, another thing that the documentary covers is, the facilities themselves. They're very expensive. You get the best quality swimming pools. You get rock climbing walls. You get the best gymnasiums. You get the best catered meals done to you. And the U of L was no different. They have fantastic facilities at the University of Lethbridge. They've got a rock climbing wall. They've got a massive gym for working out. They've got a gym for the sports. Now, in Canada, as a culture, college football is not a big thing. I know the one guy says, if I wanted to advertise the university experience, I would start with the football team. That's not really a big thing in Canada like it is in America. There was a football team. There was more emphasis put on the rugby team at the University of Lethbridge, to be honest. They had varsity sports, stuff like that. I used the swimming pool a couple times during the summer. It was really nice. I used the gymnasium, the workout facility more than I did anything else. They wonderful facilities. All of this stuff cost money, and I mean hundreds of millions of dollars of money. The entire time that I was at the University of Lethbridge, they were working on building a brand new science facility that was going to be this shining institution on the top of a hill. Like they had this, like, you know, architectural renders of this thing. It was going to be gosh darn beautiful, and it was scheduled to open the fall of 2019. Had I continued on my course of going through my final year and graduating, I would have graduated that spring previous, meaning I would not have even been able to use this brand new shiny facility that they were building, because it would not have opened up until several months after my graduation, which would have taken place in 2019 had I actually graduated. I was devastated as a result of that, because the U of L was primarily a fine arts institution. They propped up their art program, they propped up the fine arts and the gender studies and all that. The underwater basket weaving, I don't even know if they had a class. They had a class on pottery. I signed up for that. I didn't even take it. There was no emphasis at all on the sciences, like none. There was 3 computer labs in like the entire main facility, and all of the computer science students shared the same 3 computer labs, and they were all really outdated with like lunky technology, and it was not very fun. And like you go into the classrooms, they actually had chalkboards, believe it or not. They had chalkboards in a lot of the classrooms, and so I was, number one, upset that I was not going to be able to use this new facility. Guess how much the new facility costs? The U of L to build was $200 million. Where in God's name do you think that money came from? Well, it was partially subsidized by the government. There was a lot of investors that were backing that. Tuition costs went up in the final year of school, which was another reason that I dropped out, was because I did 3 years of school. And then they said, oh, by the way, all of the tuition costs and everything are going to go up. Gee, I wonder why. Does it have anything to do with the fact that the next year you plan on announcing or opening up the grand opening for this $200 million science facility that you've built, and I'll never even get to use it? So when you look at these campuses in America that are much larger, you know, they don't have 50,000 students there, they have 250,000 students, and they don't have 1 gymnasium, but they have 2 gymnasiums, and they don't have 1 swimming pool, but they have 3 swimming pools, and they're the size of an Olympic swimming pool. It's like, well, where do you think all the money for that comes from? You know, you want access to this facility, and to some extent, I would say that, yeah, it's expensive. That would explain why the students have to pay so much for it. But at the same token, you could also say, do you really need 3 swimming pools? Do you really need 2 gymnasiums? Could you maybe lower the cost of tuition if it meant having less facilities or facilities that were not as modern or new? You know, where is the responsibility on the university to plan their budget out so that they're not encompassing all of their costs onto the students? And yes, students take some responsibility in signing their name on the dotted line for the loan, but nowhere do I see anybody saying anything about what the universities have. This is why I support student loan forgiveness with a bunch of asterisks behind it, because I know a lot of people get upset about that, and they are upset about the fact that this is going to cost the taxpayer money. Well, why am I paying for your degree when I didn't even go to school in the first place? Fair point. You know, I don't think that the student debt forgiveness should just be taken out of the pockets of regular working class people, truck drivers, welders, carpenters. They shouldn't have to pay for the education that we took. But at the same time, it shouldn't be printed. It shouldn't be just printed, because now you're diluting the supply for everyone and you're causing inflation to be even worse. Where is the responsibility on these failed institutions to cover the cost? You know, these institutions that are propped up by the government, they receive millions of dollars, they receive billions of dollars every year from the federal government, both in Canada and in America, so that they can run their school. Maybe if the government spent less money on propping up these schools too big to fail, they could spend more money on helping pay back the students who have graduated and are drowning in debt because they can't pay off $1.5 million in student loans. You know, I think that the student debt should be forgiven, but it should come from the taxes that already exist. Don't increase the taxes on the working person, but you can allocate resources differently. If you look at what America spends their tax dollars on, they're buying speedboats for Sri Lanka and gender studies in Pakistan. So maybe, I don't know, if the government spent less money on Pakistani gender studies and speedboats in Sri Lanka, they could spend more money on the Americans that are suffering as a result of this. Now, I understand the arguments that are made behind why America spends all of their money on all this foreign ridiculousness. And if you've never heard of that, look it up. Speedboats in Sri Lanka and Pakistani gender studies. You say, why in God's name would American taxpayers be paying for that? Well, first of all, if you don't know that's where your tax dollars are going and you're upset because a couple of students are getting $10,000 of their debt relief, you need to pay more attention to where your fucking money is actually going. But number two, on the world stage, as a public HR, they might say, oh, this is because democracy and we're spreading freedom. And if we teach women in Pakistan about gender studies, then they're going to be more open to freedom and, they'll have a better quality of life as a result of it. That's all the fine, glossy details that they're going to put on the surface of what they publicly declare. But the real reason behind why America spends all this money on foreign countries is because they want to prop up the petrodollar. If they're sending all of the US dollars overseas to foreign countries, then that creates an artificial demand for US dollars. It creates an artificial dependency on it. And these countries say, oh, well, we have US dollars, we can spend it. And they spend it on the petrodollar. And so it creates this artificial system that gets propped up. I think that's an absolute garbage. I took 3 courses in economics, so I know what I'm talking. I think that's a garbage policy, number one, because it shows that the American government doesn't have enough faith in the US dollar in itself to be valuable. The US dollar should be valuable because it can buy shit that's valuable or shit that's produced from America that's bought with the US dollar. If you have to artificially prop it up by spending US tax dollars on a foreign entity so that they just have US dollars that they can spend, and then as a result of spending those US dollars, it creates artificial value, that's not very good financial monetary policy. But this video isn't necessarily about, US taxes. I'm just pointing out that if the US spent less money on propping up an artificial system so that everyone can pretend that the US dollar is worth something, then it might actually be worth something if you spent it at home. Now, there's a couple points I want to touch on before I end this video off. For everyone that has listened through my entire rant, I thank you very much for sticking with me. And hopefully you have some ideas of your own. I'd love to hear in the comment section what your thoughts are on student debt relief. Whether A, it should be done, or B, if it is done, where should the money come from? Should it come from creating more taxes? Should it come from better allocating the taxes that already exist? Should it come from taking money away from the schools and sending more of that money to the students and less to the CEOs of the schools or the presidents of the school that make $300,000 a year as a salary? This teacher that I brought up earlier who's selling his blood plasmid to make an extra profit, at the end of the documentary, he pulls out his degree from an envelope and he talks about how he didn't even know where it was. He had to ask his mother to mail it to him. He doesn't frame it. He doesn't put it up on his wall. It's not a source of pride for him. And that's what most people should need to recognize, is that if you go to school, you should learn something. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. But for a lot of people, when they look at their degree, all they experience is pain and suffering. It's not a source of pride. It's a source of anxiety. It's a source of pain and a reminder of how miserable their life is as a result of the choices they made and how they maybe could have had a better life if they just took a different path. I don't have a degree, but I'll tell you one thing. If I did have a degree, it sure as hell would not be framed on any wall wherever the hell I'm living at the time. I'd keep it in an envelope. I would even say my only reason that I would want at this point to have a degree, because it's already been proven to me time and time and time again that A, you don't need a degree to succeed. B, I know plenty of people who have a degree that are not succeeding. The only reason I would want to have a degree at this point is so that I could have a piece of paper to put through a shredder, because I think it would make for a good video. That's about it. I would not want a degree to frame on my wall. It would not be a source of pride for me. It would just be pain, anxiety, and I might put it through a paper shredder to make a TikTok video because it would get 1 million views or whatever, and it would be really popular. That's about the only reason I have at this point why I would want a degree, because nothing I have ever learned in my education has ever benefited me. Everything I've ever been told in my education is about having to Google things, and I've become very, very good through no fault of my own at Googling things, because if you go to, and it may not be this for every course. It may not be this for every degree. Your experience could be completely different than mine. But my experience is that everything I learned was through Google. Every textbook I ever read had the exact same information on Google. I watched YouTube tutorials on how to do some mathematical equation thing so that I would not fail the test the next day. I learned from YouTube and Google, and all of that was done for free. So if you want to learn for the sake of learning, do it for free on Google and YouTube. If you want to learn and go to university because you want to have a fancy paper and look at me, I have a degree, I'm super smart, then you do you, man. Go $300,000 in debt for a piece of paper that's not even going to guarantee you a job. You know, I'll still support the debt relief on the other end of your bad decision and of my bad decision, because we were misled. We were absolutely misled. Where was anybody in my life the entire time leading up to this to say, oh, well, maybe that $38,000 your parents saved up would have been better invested on starting a business? Nobody once said that. It was all, this money is for school and education. It doesn't have to be university. It could be a college. It could be a trade school. But it's for education. It's not, oh, this money's to start a business. This money is to buy camera equipment so that you can go and start a YouTube channel and make $1 million. This money is not. This money is for education. And education that I got came for free, because I just taught myself everything I know on Google for free. So, in conclusion, do I think you should get a degree? Absolutely not. Absolutely 100% not. I think it's incumbent on businesses. Where is their responsibility? When they say on their application form, oh, we degree preferred, they might state publicly that, oh yeah, you can still apply without a degree, and if you have the skills, then we might. No. You can apply for sure, but resume through the paper shredder, resume through. They get a stack of 20 resumes on their desk, and 10 of them have degrees. Guess where the other 10 go? Paper shredder. And they'll come and they'll tell you to your face all day and fucking night, oh yeah, we'll hire people without a degree if they have the skills. Because I had the skills, and I do have the skills, and nobody will fucking hire me to do a goddamn thing. So paper shredder. No degree? Paper shredder. That's it. You want a degree because you want a job? Go for it. You want a degree because you want to learn? Fucking Google it. They ask the kids in the documentary that they interviewed, the 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, about why they want to go to school and why they want to go to a particular school. And all of them talk about happiness. Happiness is the goal. Happiness, if I just did this thing, if I just got the degree, if I just went to school, I'll be happy. Well, I did 3 years of school, and I ain't particularly happy. And had I graduated, I still would not be particularly happy. You got to ask yourself, right? You ask these people that have a degree, are you happy? Is it because of your degree are you happy? For those people who are happy and they don't have a degree, how did you find happiness without it? I think Tim Pool's happy. At least I don't know him. I've never met him. I have to assume he's happy. He's at least successful in what he does. I think Mr. Beast is happy. At least he puts on a happy face in all of his videos. He's not ranting and angry like me in all my videos. You know, ask somebody who has a degree, are you happy? Ask someone who doesn't have a degree, are you happy? See what the contrast is between. If the goal is to chase happiness for the sake of chasing happiness, there are other ways to attain it that don't involve getting a degree. That's about all I have to say on that. You know, I don't know if you can tell, my voice is getting rasp. I'm going to have to go drink some water. I've been yelling for so long. That's about all that I have to say, actually. This video is probably going to be over an hour by the time I finally get it edited. I've got all the notes. I went through everything that the documentary covers, and I've given my own 2 cents on it. So all I can say from here is, do you agree with me? Are you sharing similar experiences? Are you gonna, do you have student debt? Are you gonna pay it back? Are you gonna be like me and take the no blood from a stone approach? You know, you can't get blood from a stone. You can hang me upside down and shake all you want. Nothing's coming out of my pockets for you, and it's for a multitude of different reasons, which I covered. So I know not everything I say people are gonna agree with. You know, I often get cast into the bin of, oh, he's a right-wing radical. Yeah, really, I'm so right-wing, I support student loans. Yeah, oh my God, he's a left-wing radical. Oh yeah, I'm so left-wing, I support free speech. You know, whatever. Other than that, thank you for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. And until then, see you next time.